Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the second episode or the second Q&A for my series Record, Mix and Release here on Creative Source. It's 3 a.m. in the morning here in Australia. It's boiling hot, but I've turned the fan off just for you guys because it blows into the microphone. It doesn't make a great sound. Hello to everyone in the chat who's joining me live, and also hi to everyone who's watching the replay. Very, very glad to see you here. And I'll be getting to some of you a bit later to take your questions and things. And we'll be going through quite a bit in this episode because we're covering episodes 5 till 9, I think I put in there. Yes, 5 till 9 of the episodes that I'm covering from the series, and I'm going to be taking as many questions as possible. Whew, I'm glad I've got the intro out of the way. Someone was just asking me in the comments whether I get nervous or not. I totally do, because I know that I can go off track sometimes. And I'm not very well prepared for this one, to be honest with you, but we will do our best. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's been watching the series. It took quite a long time to make it, and it was kind of a risk, but I'm really feeling that it's paid off because it really seems to be connecting with a few of you, if for no other reason than you just get to see someone else's process. And it's something that I really want to push home to you guys. This just is my process. If you differ at all, that's fine. I'm sure we all do things slightly differently. But for those of you who are just starting out, it may be something that you can get some ideas from. Will kind of guide you through your first 2 or 3 songs in recording. Now, before we do get into all of that stuff, I just need to say some thank yous to some donors who have donated nicely to me on my PayPal account since the last Q&A. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Jacob Hartle, I hope I get these names right, Joe Grin, of course, Frederick Crittenden, and Gary McCorkle again. Thank you so much, guys. It really does help me out, and all of these donations are really helping to keep this channel sort of on its upward trajectory, which is a big word to use in 3 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, it's really helping out a lot, so I do appreciate it lots. Now, also in the last Q&A, I think I may have mentioned that I was going to open up a forum on my website so we can all get together in there and talk to each other and share ideas with each other. And that's kind of underway, and I did put out a notice to ask for some people to help out with that, to do some testing, and some people have been doing that. So I have to thank Joe Grint again for taking part in that. Also Jimmy C, Mark Reed, David Nazem, Bobby McNen, I hope I got that right, and one of my favorites, Jade Star, who's been in there today and finding a few errors in that. So look, that forum is going to be coming out perhaps in the next week or 2. I'm hoping to launch it with a bit of a giveaway as well, so fingers crossed for that. And thanks so much. If anyone else wants to help out with that, then chuck me an email, because I could do with probably another handful of helpers with that. So that's really cool. So before we get going, let me say hi to some of the folks I've got here in the chat. I'm moving all the way. He was here early, one of my favorite subscribers, Ricky Accardi. Hey, Ricky. Ricky, been listening to some of your music this week. It's really fun to listen to your music and look at the way you go about things. Really cool. Also, we have someone from Lion's Den Music here. Maybe it's French. Maybe it's Lyon's Den. I don't know. But anyway, he's just discovered the channel. Nice to see you here. And moving down from there, we do, of course, have Joe Grin in there. G'day, Joe. And he's been to the pub before he's joined the show today. So look out in the comments. I hope there's nothing I have to moderate there, Joe. Going down... Rain, nice to see you here, Rain. I know you've been watching a whole bunch of my videos, and it's really great to see all of your comments. I really enjoy reading them as well. Also, Richard here from Canada as well. I don't know how to say that one, Richard. Saskatchewan, maybe? Hey, I've probably offended someone. I probably said something really rude and offended them. I don't know. Also, hi to Glenn Stewart here in the chat. Also, we have Folk Gallery. Oh, I'm not even going to try that one. It sounds French. It is French because they're saying bonjour. And also, talking about French, we also have Jacques here as well. And nice to see you again, Jacques. I know you've been on the shows before. It's always a pleasure to have you around. Also from Canada as well. We have Big Gamer there. G'day, someone from Germany. And then we have Ben as well. I know I've seen you here as well, Ben. I think if it's the same Ben from Holland, yes, I think it is. You were here last time. We have a Kiwi here. Nice to see Midi Man from New Zealand. What time of the morning is it there? It must be like probably 5 or 6 a.m., I'm guessing. So, yep. And I'll say hi to some of you later on. Now, if you do have any questions at all, please do make sure that you put them in the comments there, guys, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. And it would be great to get your questions because I don't have lots and lots to talk about. So you're going to help me along if you do ask some questions. And let's have a quick recap of what happened before the first Q&A. We went from episode 1 to 5, and a lot of that was just kind of a lot of preparation and the initial guide tracks. So there was kind of a lot of work done in there. And I'm a big believer in preparation and kind of doing things in a kind of an organized fashion. I was watching a post on Facebook. Someone was having a bit of a laugh about a project that they'd made about 15 years ago in Cakewalk, and they were posting it. They were saying, I didn't use any markers, I didn't label anything properly, and they were trying to make sense of this track that they recorded a few years ago. So organization does pay off, especially towards the end of the sort of sequence of events in recording a song. Now, we did all of that, and then we finally, at episode 5, got to recording the acoustic guitar, and that's the first episode I want to have a little chat about today. I've done a few videos about recording acoustic guitar, I think 2 or 3 at least anyway, and I think it's always an interesting topic, especially for those guitarists amongst us. There's a few different ways of doing things. And really what I was presenting in this episode was quite a bog standard way of me doing things. And that is to have a stereo pair of mics pointing at the guitar, usually around about 6 to 12 inches away, pointing somewhere towards the 12th fret, all that jazz. And that's fine. That's kind of what I normally do. Let me get some water. Now, in some of the videos, we have talked about a few different techniques of doubling guitars and all that kind of thing. And I did that in this song as well. I doubled the guitars on the choruses. Now, I know I've showed other techniques such as Nashville tuning and a few different techniques for recording acoustic guitars. But it's important to understand that you need to do what's right for that particular song. So I didn't want anything too overwhelmingly produced for this particular song. I wanted it to feel just nice and real, kind of like a guitar being played by someone in your living room, something like that. However, I did do some doubled guitars, and it's got a lot to do with the approach I've taken with this song. So doubling guitars, recording them, putting one guitar on the left, one guitar on the right, gives you a wider sound. It sort of opens up the whole sound. And I did that on the chorus. And I was having a chat with someone in the comments the other day about different ways of doing that. Some people well, actually, you can actually take the original one guitar track and you can use the approach of putting a delay, so copying it to a left channel, putting a little bit of delay, very, very short delay, same for the right channel, and then you can EQ them differently, and you can probably use a little bit of pitch alteration on each of them just very subtly. And that's one way you can take one recording and make it wide. And you can also get widening plugins, which I do use in the mixing process a little bit later on. But I prefer, if I can, to create the width in the song kind of naturally without necessarily using plugins. So that's why I've used guitars here. And I've recorded a left and right guitar rather than using a widening plugin. I'll tend to do that on the bigger parts of the song, especially in choruses. So that's an area where I tend to add them in. I don't tend to have them all the way through the song, but you may do. Depends on the song. But for this particular song, I really definitely wanted it to lift in the chorus. It's got a kind of a fairly positive sounding chorus, and I just want it to be kind of up tempo and just uplifting. So that's where I use width, not just with guitars though. You'll see me using doubling techniques on vocals later on, and in fact, other instruments which are good for it, a piano as well. Pianos are really good at widening, although I didn't actually do it in this particular song. I didn't widen the pianos, but yeah, you want to think about, or I think it's good to think about natural ways of achieving widening. So what have we got here going on in the chat? So I don't know, people are dropping out. It could be me dropping out. It's definitely could be me. We're working on some pretty terrible internet here. Just look at that. That is my internet, because my actual internet is so terrible that I have to use my mobile phone to do the shows. Anyway, moving on. Hopefully you didn't miss too much. So that was a lot of what that particular episode was about. And you'll see other videos from me about recording guitars. Now, moving on to episode 6. This was a really, really short episode, if my memory serves me correctly. And this is where I recorded the cajon. And I guess what was important to me about this episode, now, first of all, if you need to know, or if you want to know one way to record a cajon, this is it. I actually used a stereo pair of mics on the front. That's kind of unnecessary. You could really just use a mono mic on the front, on the snare part of things. And I used a condenser, if I remember, at the rear, pointing in at a 45-degree angle so it doesn't get the full bump of that bass. But actually what I was kind of trying to get across in this video a little bit, and I don't know if you spotted it, was that I'm sorry, I'm reading your comments here. I'm not just making sure you guys can actually see me. What I was going to say is that it's about the approach. If you watch a bunch of videos on YouTube about how to record cajon, you'll often see this approach where they suggest do it on a hard wooden floor, this type of thing, because they're trying to get a really kind of big sound out of it, often a really, really lively sound. But of course, as I mentioned in the video, I wanted the opposite to that. I wanted a really dead, kind of underproduced sound. And this is very, very important, because when you're watching channels like mine, especially if you're starting out, you're going to hear lots and lots of advice about how to do things correctly. And you absolutely should try to learn how to do things as so-called correctly. You'll often hear me talking about, hey, the best way to record it is this or that. However, you kind of should enjoy, I think, experimenting and trying to get your own sounds as well. In this case, I wasn't going for the typical sound. I wanted something quite, is the word atypical? Just not very typical at all. I went into a room which had thick carpets, and I just got rid of all the ambience from the sound, and made a really dead sound in that way. And you sort of really want to think in terms. Another example of that would be guitars, for example. As we were talking about before, you'd often hear people say, hey, don't put the microphone too close to the guitar. Like, don't put it 3 or 4 inches away from the guitar, because that's not how we listen to guitars. We don't put our ears up to guitars, and that's not how we hear them. And that's very, very true. However, we're not always looking for absolutely authentic sounds. Sometimes you do want an unusual sound. And I've got a couple of my favorite artists' albums obviously had the guitar recorded with the microphone very, very close, and you can hear all the little fret buzzes and things like that. And sometimes that's what you want. That's what you can enjoy. So don't be scared to kind of understand the basic advice for recording these things and then just throwing it aside and doing your own thing, getting your own sound. Nothing wrong with that at all. Now, the other area you hear about this very, very typically would be for vocals. We all know about the proximity effect on vocals. This is where we get close in like this, yeah? And when we get nice and close in, it gets very bassy and very thick. And so often people are going to say, look, that's not very natural, because we don't often sing into people's ears like that really close. And it can sound a little bit weird if you're really close singing. However, again, there are times when you do want to get that effect. There's a couple of songs I've recorded in the past where I really did want to get the feeling that this person was singing right into your ear. So remember, you've got all of this equipment and this knowledge that you're going to have. Do learn some really, really good practices for things, and then be prepared to throw it all out of the window sometimes and just do what is going to serve the song. And that was the other point of this recording, this cajon. And it's a good way to work if you can. I had an idea in my head about how I wanted it to sound, and I thought about what techniques I would use in order to achieve that sound, rather than just use a vanilla approach. So that's my points there. I want to go through and say hi to some of you here. I think some of you I was dropping out with. I hope I'm back for you guys. Some of you are saying I'm coming through fine, so that's good. I'm going to randomly pick some comments here. Rain, we electric guitar players need to carry over our tone insanity to yes. And look, I really agree with this comment here from Jacques. Creativity is not making things sound natural, and sometimes it is, but a lot of the time we can sort of get obsessed with that. But I kind of always like to go back to Queen, I think, and obviously the well-touted example of good music being Bohemian Rhapsody, and it may be a bit overplayed, but it's deserved all the attention it's got. And Freddie Mercury in there doing lots and lots of harmonies to himself, because although they all did sing, he did an awful lot of harmonies to himself. And they ultimately, if you really look at it, they couldn't play Bohemian Rhapsody live. They always had to cut in a little bit of the original track. They usually put the video up and that. Too many of us get obsessed with the idea of just recreating the sound of a band live and thinking, oh, couldn't perform this live. Sometimes throw that out the window, forget it. Just let your brain go crazy. Whatever sounds you want to add in there, do it. It's about it's a different medium. We're talking about recorded music. We don't have to make it something that could be played live. And I just want to say hi to Jade. I mentioned you earlier, Jade. You're going to see that on the replay. Thanks very much for helping out in the forum, Tess, and also saying hi here to Ryan. Yes, Ryan, nice to see you here. Thank you so much for watching the channel. And also Deer Creek Audio. Nice to see you here. I still watch your videos. I still tune in and watch your videos. I really love it. Guys, check his channel out. He does a really very nice approach to making videos. He's just very chilled, very laid back. Usually starts off on his guitar, playing some ad lib to a backing track and making some really nice music. And I find watching Deer Creek Audio videos just very, very relaxing. He's not hyper like me at all. So yeah, if you want to chill out, definitely go and watch Deer Creek Audio. So moving on there about that episode, recording the cajon. We then went on to recording the group vocals, and this was probably a little bit, I'm not going to say it was clickbait, but it wasn't quite representative of what I was doing in the title. This wasn't like recording a choir. This was really about faking a choir, hand claps and all. And again, here I was talking about really thinking about the sound that I wanted. So again, normally I might sing, if I was singing a solo vocal, perhaps this distance away. You can't really see from this camera angle, but I'm say about, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches away. Sometimes a bit further, depending on the vocal part. But it would kind of sound odd if you put 12 voices together that are always doing that. Well, not odd, but it wasn't the sound that I was looking for. I was hoping to get something a little bit more authentic. So again, this is another thing where I thought, well, what sound do I want? How am I going to get that? So I backed off from the microphone like this to try and get much more of that room sound in there. And for those of you who are not so familiar with recording, it's one of the I mean, apart from the proximity effect of things getting much bassier and thicker as you get closer, and apart from all kinds of other things that are going to affect the sound with distance, more sibilance, perhaps all that kind of thing. The other consideration is that you do, the further away you move away from, especially with a condensed microphone, you pick up a lot more of the voice of the room. Sorry, so I'll move away like this, and you're hearing a lot of room like this, and close up. Your ears tend to perceive less and less of that room. So I was looking for something that would be a bit authentic, because if you were recording a choir, you probably don't have lots of individual microphones for each person. Generally, it would be often one or two microphones, kind of room mics recording the choir. So I kind of went for the approach of trying to make sure I was really backed off from the microphone, getting a bit of the room sound, and approaching it in that way. Again, I use width quite a lot. And I use the idea of adding more and more voices which were going out to the sides. I'm not quite sure how a real choir, or the type of choir I was thinking of, would be arranged in that way, but I more went for the principle that I tend to almost always go with when I'm thinking about width, is anything bassy, anything to do with bass, I tend to keep right in the middle, pretty much mono. And then I like to have things on the higher end a little bit wider. That works well for me. And of course, anything which has a lead part, like a lead vocal, I'll tend to make sure there's a center presence, even if I'm doubling up and going out to the side. So another sort of thing which is all about width there. Someone did mention in the comments about the hand claps, because I recorded some hand claps as well. Could have used a plug-in for that, I guess, but decided to go for real ones. I wanted to make it sound like the choir were clapping. And one thing that was mentioned to me is I probably did it in a kind of a long-winded way, because what I did is I just did a whole bunch of individual recordings on different tracks, and I eventually just mixed them all down onto a stereo track, because I didn't think I needed 12 hand clap tracks. I was happy just to have a stereo mix of them. But somebody did mention that the way I could have done it was just set up a loop, had it going round and round, and then had Cakewalk set up to record different takes on different lanes, which you can do. You can do that on lots of DAWs, and that was a really good suggestion. I'm just trying to see who that came from. I can't say his username. It was something like Brundlefly, I think. So thanks very much for that one. So yeah, really, look, maybe on other days I would have used that technique. I didn't happen to on that day, but it's a really good suggestion if you want to do things like that. I wouldn't have done the choir in that way, because I actually wanted to get some really different mic positions for those different harmonies. They weren't all at the same distance. So yeah, that was a good suggestion, though, definitely for the hand claps. Whew. Flying through here, aren't we? Flying through. Have we got any questions at all? Do you use auto punch? A good question there. I should use auto punch. I tell you what, this is something I'm really, really bad with. And often when I've sat there and tried to sew bits of audio together from different takes and things, I think I could have just set up an auto punch. It's a really good point there, though. And pretty much all of the DAWs have the ability to do that. Something that I must look into doing a bit more, because I waste an awful lot of time, I think, not doing that. So thanks for bringing that up. See, I'm still learning, guys. You're always going to be learning, I can promise you that. And also Jade said, I use your width techniques on vocals. I did a song for Saigon Slick. Oh, cool. And the Boston Bard I did this week. So thanks for that. It was only a 3-part harmony over 6 tracks. Yeah, those guys are cool. Saigon Slick and the Boston Bard are from, well, I know them through Pete John's channel, and those guys have a kind of a virtual band going on where I'm not sure. I know one of them lives in Thailand, and I think the other guy might be in the States. I'm not sure, but they have a virtual band going on. It's very, very cool. They've got some really amusing videos as well. Nice to see you taking part in that, Jade. Yeah, so, well, I'm glad you got to use it. So how did it turn out? Did it sound as good as you thought it might, or not? She might be saying, oh, sound terrible. But anyway, moving on from there, just looking to see if we have any other questions in there. I don't see any at the moment. So if you do, please feel free to chime in. So moving on from there, went on to the lead vocal parts, and there was actually quite a bit to this because I did something which pretty much almost always do these days. So apart from just recording those vocals, I did some vocal comping, and I also did a little bit of pitch correction. We'll get back to pitch correction in a moment because there's always a conversation to be had about that. So comping, in actual fact, this came up during the process. I hadn't planned it. I tried to sing the song all of the way through on a few occasions, and on that particular day, I've been singing this song for a good couple of years, but on that particular day, I noticed that by the time I was getting to the last chorus, I was thin on energy, just pure energy. So I decided I'm just not going to do it all in one take. I recorded all of the verses in the song first, and then I recorded all of the choruses so that I could just give full energy to those chorus parts. And the other thing that's happened as well, I've got a pretty sort of big bellowy voice when I sing hard, and it takes quite a bit of change in the mic technique, and you're not always going to get that right in the moment. So doing it in two separate kind of takes enabled me to kind of set my positions and have it kind of as good as it could get in any case. So I did it in that way, and I did around about 5 takes. For those of you who haven't seen the episode or not familiar with comping, Cakewalk has some comping features, but a lot of the other DAWs do now as well. And it just means you can record your various takes, 5, 6, 7 takes, whatever you want to do, and then you can take the best of them. So I usually go through phrase by phrase, and you can sort of preview them and have a listen and pick the best. And it's an interesting process actually because um, you know what you're actually looking for after a while, I think personally, is not the perfect take, not the perfect take where your pitch was perfect or you sang it, you got the phrasing perfect. But I'm always looking out for those things that kind of happened in the spur of the moment on that particular take, which kind of sounded natural, had more character to the vocal or something like that. So some people, I've seen some people in the comments, I don't like to get negative. I really don't. But I have seen people say this is kind of cheating and you should be able to sing it all through in one take. I don't believe that at all. Sometimes in a moment, you're going to sing a particular phrase in a way you've never sung it before, and it's just going to be magic. But for the rest of that particular take, it might have been garbage. So at least you get to get that little magic moment and then have the rest of it sounding good as well. Interestingly enough, I'm going to digress a little bit from the vocals here, but I was watching a really interesting video with Phil Collins the other day talking about his most famous song, In the Air Tonight, which legend has it he recorded in his home studio. It's not quite true. He recorded some of the demos for his home studio. I think they went into a pro studio to finish it off. Anyway, he was saying, I can't sing it because I'll probably break some copyright rule. But with that song, the most famous part of it is the little drum intro which goes into the chorus. Do 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 do. Surely that's not copyrighted. Anyway, he was saying in this little interview that particular part there, he'd never played it before. He normally just went into the chorus without doing a fill. He'd never rehearsed it like that before. And just for some reason in that particular moment, that's what he decided to do, is that drum fill. And he never did it after that in the takes afterwards. And then when they listened to the various takes, they decided to keep that. So that's why I say it's really not cheating. He may have stuffed up a bit later in the song, done something horrible, and decided to join the 2 takes together, and of course he's going to keep the best parts. So I don't know why we've got turn off the stream going on there. Oh my goodness. Okay, wow, we've got some really interesting things going on there. Anyway, wow. The internet, hey? So moving on from there, I was a bit flustered by that. So it's not cheating at all. So I don't think you need to think in that sort of way. Now, the other thing which is a little bit kind of controversial, I suppose, moving on from there, is the Melodyne parts that I did to the video. So look, this is, I don't want to delve into this too much, but if you asked me probably 5 years ago, I would have been saying, "Oh no, don't use pitch correction tests." I wouldn't use the word cheating. I probably just felt that there was too many people abusing it who couldn't sing, I guess, and then we're trying to use pitch correction as a get out clause, and maybe that phenomena exists. I don't know, but I sort of started. I think I had a song going back 2 or 3 years ago. Where sometime after recording it, there was a vocal on there which was sung by someone else, and that it was just a little bit pitchy, and everything else was pretty good. And I wasn't going to be able to get the person back, so I decided I'll just correct that little bit of it, and learned a little bit about Melodyne and using pitch correction. And I thought, oh, that's not too bad. And then a little bit later, we were recording some particular sort of main part in a song, and then I wanted to add some harmonies to it. And again, I was feeling it wasn't quite there. It was some time later, and I decided to pitch correct the harmonies. And then I went, oh wow, it wasn't like before it was awful, like anyone would particularly notice that the vocals were off. But when you did actually correct them, particularly on some long notes altogether, and when they're in harmony, it really just hit the spot for me. I just really, really liked it. So I take that approach with it. I just do a little bit. Personally, as I say in the video, I tend to do it on the extended notes. I don't grab all of the notes and just pitch correct them. For me, you get some pretty weird results if you do that. It may be that I'm just not that good at using Melodyne, but I get pretty weird results. So what I do is I just focus on those notes which really stand out. Long notes at the end of phrases often. The little short notes in runs and things, I don't often do those on my voice, at least anyway. But yeah, so that's where I use it, and it's one of those tools that it's worth investing a little bit of time in just to get to know the basics of it, and you can make good use of it. Now, I'd love to hear your opinions on it. Let me know in the comments if you hate pitch correction, if you think I'm gone to the dark side, that's fine, or if you use it yourself, let me know. How you do? Yes. So moving on, let's just say look through here. Yes, I think there is a trial version, Joe, of Melodyne, which comes with Cakewalk. So definitely check that out. And yeah, we had someone in the comments with issues. Do you know what? That's the first person, Jay, that I've ever had to block from the channel or from the chat. There you go. It's the internet, folks. Oh, did throw me for a moment. Yes, indeed. Have a glass of water and I'll calm down after that. Whew. So moving on then to episode 9. In episode 9, this is where we had moved past the actual recording of any of the parts. Now, I just will mention here, you don't have to be very, very strict about this. Don't go, if you think of a new part that comes to you a little bit later down the line, go ahead, record it. You don't have to be very, very rigid. I'm giving you a kind of a framework to work with, but you don't have to follow it ever so precisely. But talking about frameworks, though, in the next episode, episode 9, or this is the last episode that you've all seen, here I was talking about preparing for the mix. So essentially, a lot of this was just kind of tidying up, kind of organizing the project. So as you're moving around it during the mixing phase, everything's nicely organized, getting rid of any of the guide tracks that we, weren't using anymore. Making sure our naming was good, coloring things. I think coloring for me really is a very, very helpful sort of tool. Just coloring the channels, you can do it in pretty much all the DAWs now. And then going ahead and organizing our buses. And for me, that is one of the most important things there, making good use of the buses for grouping things together. Um, I don't want you to think that there's this kind of, I mean, I do actually have a bit of OCD, but it's not about OCD. It's not about having things just so and perfect. There's actually a real purpose to organizing things here. And that is because, to give you a bit of a preview, later on, we're going to be working towards doing the first stage of our actual mix, which is called the static mix. It's called the static mix because there's no automation in it yet. It's just going to be the sort of basic mix for the song. And what you want to avoid when you do your first mix, when you're mixing in general, is having really, really long sessions where you're listening to the song for like 1 or 2 hours or something like that, because you lose all perspective in that time. Your ears get fatigued. It's very, very hard to judge because you're too close to it. So everything I'm doing at this stage is aiming towards mixing in like about 10 to 15 minutes. Doing that may be surprising to you guys, I think, because you're probably thinking that mixing is this huge task that you're going to do. But in order to do it that quickly, in order to get that kind of first, I might be exaggerating a bit, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, but anything up to 30 minutes is what I'm aiming for. But in order to be able to do that, you're going to have the project really, really well organized. And from memory, I think I was getting up at this point to around about, was it 60 something tracks or something along those lines? That's quite a difficult thing to manage if you want to really quickly get your basic mix done in 10 or 15 minutes. And so I think that, don't sort of think, why is he organizing that? This is a bit boring. Look, honestly, you're free to do as you wish in that way. But I promise you that if you do get into the habit of organizing things well, that you're going to be able to achieve that final sort of static mix using your kind of intuition and your instinct just as a listener of music to know when things are in balance. And you're going to do that really, really quickly. So that's the goal here. And that's what we're building up to. I'm not sure which episode that happens in. I'll just double check for you. So we actually get to the static mix in episode 11, so another 2 or 3 episodes away yet. So there's a little bit of preparation. We've got some gain staging coming up and some good stuff like that. But so that's the purpose of organizing it in this way. And for many, many years, I sort of just probably did what a lot of you would do. Your instinct is, hey, I've recorded everything, and and often I didn't even sort of prepare for a mix. I just went with the mix that I'd been using while I was recording, because it usually by that time it sounded great to me. It's really terrible when you lose perspective like that. You listen to it a week later or a month later and you go, what was I thinking? It's really dreadful. So that is why we took time in that episode to make sure that we're doing that. And that is kind of a lot of what happens in the next couple of episodes. And it's a bit of a theme of mine, to be honest with you, all the way through the process is maintaining a sense of organization. I know this is a really fun thing to do. And you're probably at work all day in some strict structure, which you just want to come home, record your music and have a lot of fun. It's cool. You definitely should do that. But if you want to kind of get a better result at the end of it, then it's good to kind of do these steps of preparation building up to the mix. So that's pretty much as I'm going to cover for the moment. And I'm just going to go through some of the comments here. The great gig in the sky vocal was a combination of, yes, I wouldn't mind betting some of the most famous vocals of all times have been done in several takes. Right, too much correction makes it sound wonky, hence the shit. Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably the song which really came out, when was that? It must be 15 years ago. Probably gave pitch correction a bad name. And I think the way that I've used Melodyne and the way a lot of people use Melodyne is is quite distinct from using a kind of an auto pitch correction. I know that where have I got another auto pitch correction? I think as a part of the Ozone suite, or I think I've got pitch correction in there. Tell me if I'm wrong, guys. Or was it with their vocal plugin? Anyway, yeah, and that's just like automatically on. You give it a key and it just does every single note. Sounds really well. I was going to say it sounds dreadful. It doesn't sound dreadful if that's what you want. And I believe that with the Shure song that that's what they were probably aiming for. Oh, this is going to be a fun new toy to play with. However, I think that it's quite different now, and you'll often see people when people are debating this. You'll often see, most popular songs now have pitch correction on them, and it may. I don't know how true that is. I suspect it would be true because it's quite sort of it's transparent now. You don't really hear the effect, but anyway. I definitely could go with the idea that too much of it can ruin things. At the end of the day, we do have to be careful with the idea that we don't want to think that just because a vocal's pitch is correct, that's going to mean it's an awesome vocal. There's much more to an awesome vocal than that. And if you ever figure out how to get an awesome vocal every time, then let me know about it because I'm still learning about that myself. So let's have a look at this one from Dan Wise. I think we've met before, haven't we, Dan? Have you tried the MIDI polyphonic expression MPE capability of Cakewalk with something that supports? I haven't actually, but that's a very interesting subject, Dan. Thanks for bringing that up because I definitely should look into that. I'd like to get hold of one of those Seaboard, or what they call the keyboards that you're talking about. Not much for a keyboard player, though, I have to say. But I'll definitely look into that. Good suggestion, Dan. Moving on. George, you're another Reason user. We have a few Reason users around. I use the Reason stock pitch correction and sometimes Melodyne. I don't know how that is. How have you found it, George? Does it work well for you? Would you say Melodyne's better? Let us know in the comments down there. Moving on from there. I hope your YouTube channel goes to the roof. Thank you very much, Daryl. Daryl. Oh, of course I know Daryl. Nice to see you here, Daryl. And also moving on from there. Jimmy's here, of course. G'day, Jimmy. Thanks for your help again, mate. Ear fatigue is a very real thing. I like to leave a project alone for a couple of weeks after I think I'm finished mixing. I always find something that needs fit. Absolutely. I mean, definitely. This is one of the best things that you can do, and I think I did mention it in the video. I'd definitely mention it a little later on. Having some time away from your mix is definitely going to be the best thing that you can do. And another little tip, I think I may have mentioned it once or twice before, but I'll mention it here again. I think I'm going to have this in an upcoming video, actually. I'm hoping to do a video about sort of some quick recording hacks, and this is a good little hack. If you can turn your monitors off. When I talk about not monitors, not as in your speaker monitors. That would be a weird way to mix, wouldn't it? I'm talking about your computer monitors, your screens. If you can do that during a mix, you'll find it's just like a magic bullet. Honestly, you'll suddenly hear things completely differently when you're not looking at the interface. Definitely something worth doing. And if you've got a MIDI controller like me or a Surface controller like me, it means you can actually make adjustments to your mix, even though your screens are switched off. Jane, I wish war fatigue. Oh my goodness. Okay, I think Jade's having fun here. Yeah, Rain, I think you're right. It was intentional. Moving on from there. Oh, Dan, that's right. That's where I recognise your name from. So thank you very much, Dan. I think hopefully I thanked you for that either in this video or the last one. And moving on from there, we've got George Cassie. You think Melodyne is more natural? Yeah, look, the only thing that I'll say about Melodyne, which you've got to be really careful with, and I'm talking a little bit off the top of my head here. You will hear a video that I did, and I think Susie was singing in it. It may have been a microphone test or another video that I did where I was talking about vocals, and a few people mentioned to me, that her voice sounded a little strange. And now Susie suffers from asthma, and sometimes when she's singing, if she starts to get a bit of asthma happening, you could sort of hear it in her throat a little bit. But I don't remember that she did on that particular day. And a few people in the comments of this particular video said her voice was a little bit weird in some parts, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I went back to the track, and I thought, yeah, when I totally soloed it, there was something really strange going on with her voice. And what it was is that I'd applied Melodyne to it, and there was a particular setting. I wish I could remember what it was, but I didn't have that setting switched on, which I normally do. And yeah, it was creating, if you listen really, really carefully, almost like a tiny amount of distortion, or like she just had something in her throat or something like that. So definitely something to watch out for with Melodyne. You've got to be careful with that. Moving on to Brett. Good day, g'day, Brett. By the way, I've been watching your channel. I love it. Lots of great information. New to home recording, and it's been a great help. Yes, Brett, there's quite a few people new to home recording here, and quite a few people coming back to it after a few years. And this gives me a good opportunity to mention what I did mention a little bit earlier. I will soon be releasing some forums on my website, the Creative Source forums, I guess I'll call them, what have you. There's a kind of a reason why I'm doing it. I know that we're all probably members of Facebook groups. Not everyone uses Facebook, so there was a part of it that was behind it. And there's a few, I'm not going to name the websites, but there's a few forum websites. And what I generally find with them is they're a little bit elitist, and they're not very welcoming for people who are just starting out, who are going to have so-called stupid questions, or just not going to know things, perhaps don't have much equipment. And I thought I just wanted to create a place where people can come share their ideas, where it's a no tolerance, a low tolerance zone, maybe no tolerance zone for kind of elitism or any kind of negativity towards people who don't know things or haven't got as much gear or haven't had a hit record. I don't know. So that's the idea behind this forum. So look out for my announcements over the next couple of weeks. I'd love to see people like Brett in there asking questions. And it also means, and I know that Ricky, who was in the chat earlier, who sends me a few emails, will know that I'm quite slow sometimes at answering my emails when people ask me questions. It doesn't mean that I can kind of open this out to the whole community, and you can help each other out a little bit as well. So that's a bit behind what's behind that. So anyway, I'm going through a few more comments here. Let's have a look. Listening to the song on Spotify gives a lot of credit to the series. Yeah, I'm glad you're listening to it there, Jacques. Look, to be quite honest with you, it's not the favorite of my own songs. I actually recorded it at the beginning because it's one of the more musically simple songs of mine. And the last thing I wanted to do was record a series on camera where I was having to think about something musically difficult and that sort of thing. So I thought, I'll just record this because it's quite a straightforward song. And so, yeah, it's hard for me. I'm glad you enjoy it. It's hard for me to really know whether I like it or not, because I haven't had enough distance from it yet. Ask me in a couple of years whether it's one of my favorite songs of mine or not. Don't know. Moving on. Thank you for not using Facebook. It's got pretty bad. I haven't been. Well, look, some people definitely make a choice not to be on Facebook. I am a member of quite a number of Facebook groups to do with recording. And there's 2 or 3 of them that I think are really awesome. Absolutely. Home Recording Zone is one of my favorites. I really love it in there. There's some good positive vibes in a lot of them. But as you say, not everyone's on Facebook. A lot of people, perhaps rightfully so, in my opinion, decide to not be on Facebook. I did it for about 5 years one time, and yeah, I didn't miss it at all. I'm really just there in terms of music and to share my music. The odd photograph with my mum in England. G'day, Mum, if you're watching. Oh, by the way, I'm for those of you in the UK, I'll be heading there later in the year. I'm going to visit the UK. So if any of you live in the kind of Portsmouth, Southampton kind of area, I'd definitely love to catch up with you towards the end of the year. That would be nice. I won't be heading to Canada anytime soon unless the channel gets an awful lot bigger, but I wish it's one of the countries that I would like to go to. Moving on. How do you set punch in and out settings? I'll have to go through that in an actual video with your Lions Den music. It's a good one to ask about, and I'll definitely do a little video on that one. I've got a few little videos to make. Moving on. If you're an amateur vocalist like myself, what would you recommend to help you boost the vocals in the mix? Good question, Ryan. Now, first of all, it sort of depends on the song, of course. You know, some songs you can just do this with pure volume, right, and perhaps EQ. But more often than not, we use compressors. Unfortunately, if you're kind of new to recording, then compression can be quite a difficult subject to kind of get your head around. I was chatting with someone about this the other day. It may have been Jimmy, I think. And often when you sort of learning about compression, you're looking at people's settings, you can't really hear any difference. So one thing I recommend is looking at parallel compression. This is where you send the vocal to a bus, and then you actually put really, really heavy compression on there. Not the kind of compression settings you'd normally use, really extreme compression settings. When you listen to that particular channel that you send it to, it won't sound all that great. It will sound like everything's just been squashed to a very, very low dynamic range. Dynamic range is the difference between the quieter parts and the louder parts. So you're squashing it down, and then, you know, it doesn't sound great, honestly. But what happens is if you just have your normal vocal channel and then you blend that very extremely compressed channel in with it, then that's a really, really good way of keeping your vocals kind of present. And I think it's something which, for people just starting out who are a bit new to this, is a little bit easier to achieve some results from than simply using compression on a channel of a vocal. So that's my quick tip for you there. I think I do have a video on parallel compression, so you might just want to have a search through my videos and have a look at that. Moving on there. Sergio, hi Mike, could you give us a little explanation of the difference between gain and volume while mixing? Trying to think of the best way to explain this. Look, the way I think about volume, I suppose. Give me a moment. So volume is something that I think about happens at the end of the process. Volume is what you're basically using the fader for. It's where you're basically controlling how loud is it going to be coming out of the speakers. Gain is more about the signal going into each stage. Well, I'm going to talk specifically about, say, gain staging here. So, for example, you could have your gain on say, an electric guitar up fairly high so that when you go into an overdrive effect, it sounds really, really overdriven, right? And you're going to get that really, really buzzy electric guitar sound. But it might actually be ultimately very quiet in volume. And that's where the fader at the end comes in. Now, if your guitar gain is not set high enough, you're not going to achieve a high enough level to actually get that overdrive sound. You're not going to actually drive that effect. It's going to sound like a clean or relatively clean guitar, more than likely. That's probably the easiest way I can explain it off the top of my head at 3:53 in the morning. I hope that makes some sort of sense. So yeah, gain is, you could have a very, very high gain on something, making it kind of sound loud, but then ultimately the volume of it may be very low, and that's what you're going to use your fader for. I hope that does make some sort of sense to you guys. If any of you can think of a better way of explaining it, I'm sure you probably can, actually. But it's been something I have been thinking about covering in a video, Sergio, so hopefully I can think of a better way to explain it than that or demonstrate it. I trained in SSL and needs back in the 90s, and I'm learning all this new stuff, new DAW stuff from scratch. Yeah, it's quite a different thing, I think, especially in terms of what we were talking about there, Dan, in terms of signals. The digital realm is quite different, and probably the biggest mistake, if you like, that people are going to make when they've come from an analog world is the basic one is recording things too hot, setting too high a signal. It's just not necessary within the digital realm. And that's takes a bit of sort of relearning. I did it for ages. I would always try and get a really hot signal for everything for years, actually, before I realized there was just no need for it because, like you, I'd recorded on analog systems. Moving through, we've got some love here from Madzia7. I appreciate your vids. Keep doing great content about Cakewalk. I definitely will. As well as some other DAWs. This is something someone was talking about recently, where I use other DAWs. I definitely want to do some little series about some different DAWs. Cakewalk is something which is a big part of my history. I've been using it for around about 25 years. So it's something I can definitely speak to with a reasonable amount of ease, although I'm learning new things, usually from viewers all the time. But I always think it's interesting to look at other things. Reaper has come up quite a lot in the comments, and a few friends of mine use Reaper. So definitely something I want to give a try out. On the Mac, I've got a video plan to use GarageBand. I've never used GarageBand, but I do have a Mac in the other room, and I've been thinking I'm going to see if I can record a song on GarageBand. I'm always watching my friend Pete Johns. He records on his phone or on his iPad on GarageBand, and I think it's interesting because I think it's sort of written off as not a proper DAW. I'm going to sort of put that to the test and see what I can do with it. And definitely, I'll probably be doing some more videos again as well. On Studio One coming up as well. Cakewalk is definitely my DAW of choice when people ask me about, if they've got no budget at all. I'd definitely go Cakewalk every single time, because if you go down the route of trying the sort of light versions of things, you tend to hit brick walls, and there's a need to upgrade and pay money fairly quickly. Cakewalk is a full DAW. There's no limitations to it. You can definitely, as I'm showing in the series, record a whole song, release it, all kinds of things you can do on Cakewalk. But I do like Studio One as well from Presonus. And if I was going to talk about paid, sort of more, I don't want to call them premium, but definitely paid DAWs, because not everyone really enjoys Cakewalk when they've tried it, then I tend to go down the route of Studio One. So I'm going to be doing a few Studio One videos coming up soon as well. Mr. Jinx, g'day, Mr. Jinx. Been seeing you in the comments quite a bit recently. Nice to have you on board. I am in Perth, Western Australia, and it's 3:57. We're just opposite sides of the world from each other. I've never been to Florida, although I have been to the US on quite a number of occasions and had a lovely time there. Spent a fair amount of time in Georgia, South Carolina, as well as lots of time in San Francisco, actually. Quite a lot of time in San Francisco as well. Love the States. Must get back again sometime. And also, lastly, from Fascination Music, hi from Scotland. Some of my favorite music comes from Scotland. What tracks do you use as reference for mixing? Good question, actually. Obviously for me, when you get down to it, you probably most of us tend to record a similar genre of music a lot of the time. So I don't think so much in terms of particular tracks. I think in terms of, I've got kind of at the back of my mind always artists in mind who I think my music is kind of similar to. So yeah, it really goes on a song by song basis. There's not any one song, that I always go to. Did I put in the comments somewhere? I may say in the video that I'm pretty sure I say it in a later video, so I may as well say it now. If people can guess the reference track that I used for this song later on when I do the mastering, then I'll send them a free t-shirt. How can you turn that down? It was a song. Oh God, I've got to get this right now, haven't I? It was a song from the 90s. That's all I'll say at the moment. So if you could guess what song you think this is similar to, I'd be interested to hear. It could be completely different to my reference track. We shall see. But yeah, when you a lot of people ask this, what are good reference tracks to use? It just depends. If you're recording something that is a symphony, then perhaps you need to use Mozart or Beethoven piece. I don't know. That was a bit random, wasn't it? Anyway, moving on. I've been confused that the master output can be just about clipping, whereas if I switch to the radio using same circuit, it sounds deafening. I will be covering. I'm definitely covering that later on. Just on the master channel, I must admit, during the mixing phase, I tend to be aiming for around about between -3, -6, something like that, before I go into mastering. That's a whole kind of longer discussion, which we will be having definitely in the later videos. In terms of mastering, yeah, it depends on the needs of where you're going to be releasing to. So I'll be releasing, I'm keeping Spotify mostly in mind, and they have particular requirements about peak levels. But a lot of mastering in terms of volume is actually not so much concerned about peak levels, but the average level. Sometimes we think of that as the RMS or the LUFS. Never quite sure how to pronounce it, LUFS. So yeah, that's what we're more concerned about, in my opinion, in the mastering phase. We will get to that in a later episode, my friend. I'll explain it much better there than I do here. Now, Jade, your entire studio is built on 2 iPads and iPad Pro network. Yes, look, I definitely can dig that, Jade. It's going to be really interesting to make this this GarageBand. I'll see if I'm tempted to load it up on my old iPad and give that a go. I don't want to step on Pete's toes, though. He does such a great job on his channel. Pete Johns, by the way, folks. He has a channel mostly about recording in GarageBand. Moving on, I use Mixcraft 9 Pro now. Hey, that's something that I would love to have a try. I'm led to believe that Mixcraft is quite different to other DAWs. Is it even correct to call it a DAW? I'm not sure, but I've heard some really good things about it. It looks like it's much more, perhaps as its name suggests, console orientated. Am I right about that, William, or am I wrong? I would love you to tell me about that, and I must check it out sometime. Rain, look, I'm pretty sure that you would wear my T-shirt with pride. All you have to do is guess what my reference track was for. And Brett, nice to have another Aussie in here from Brisbane, living in Vancouver. Okay, there's a lot of Canadians. Maybe I do need to save up my pennies and make a trip to Canada some point. I was almost said Canada. Can you believe that, guys? Almost said Canada. It is 4 a.m. in the morning. It's been an hour-long show, and I have had an absolute ball. You guys have been great in the comments, apart from one obvious exception, but we won't delve into that right now. There's always one, isn't there, on the internet? What can you say? I want to say a big thank you to you all again for watching this series. It's really nice to see that as I release the episodes, there's a few of you obviously waiting for them to come out, and you seem to be getting something from it, which is really what it's all about for me. I love to hear that you guys are just getting little tidbits of information which are really helping you through the process. It's all about that. And also, I also get the opportunity to learn things from you guys. Some people put things in the comments to say, hey, you could have done it this way, you could have done it that way. And that helps me to progress as well. So I get a lot from it. So I'm going to say goodbye or au revoir to you guys now. I see there's a few people just getting in on the last minute there. Hi to you guys. You're going to have to watch the replay. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you all here. I will be doing another Q&A. Let me just check my schedule here. I'm so organized, aren't I? I will be doing one on the 4th of March, and that is when the series will be finished. So it'll be a final kind of look at the whole series, and we'll be moving on to other things after that. As always, love to hear your suggestions about which videos I should be making. you guys have already given me 2 or 3 in your questions here, giving me ideas about things I could be making. Um, if you did like this show, then do make sure you hit that like button, folks. And if you're watching on the replay as well, you made it to the end, an hour. Have you got nothing else to do with your life? I'm so glad to hear that you haven't. And I'm going to be seeing you on the 4th of March for the next live show. I may be doing some other premieres. If you're not sure, premieres are where I release an episode, but I'm available in the chat as the episode goes out. It kind of goes out live, if you like. So I'll probably do one more of those in between. So as ever, remember, ask questions in the comments down below. Also, if I'm looking for probably 4 or 5 other people at the moment to help me test out the new forums. If you would like to do that, make sure you email me at creative.source.tube@gmail.com. You can see that email address also down in the description as well. And if you've got time just to be able to jump into these forums, give it a little test run for me, let me know if you find any bugs at all, then that would be very, very handy indeed. So guys, I'm going to say good night to you from me, or is it good morning? I'm not sure. You have a great day, evening, morning ahead of you. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video.